Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. A customer came to me with a bit of a problem. They have managed to break off a screw inside a very expensive indexable carbide shell mill. This screw is well below surface level and it's also hardened. And to make things just a little more interesting, the customer has played with it a bit, tried to center punch it, scraped around in there a bit. So good chance the first couple threads are damaged now as well. So this could be a bit of a challenge. I've got this arbor that would be absolutely perfect for holding this tool. And for some time now, I've been trying to get the seized on sleeves off of it. And I've been careful not to damage the important stuff. I've mangled the sleeves. I've given up on saving the sleeves a long time ago. And the only way I can use this today is if I get these old garbage sleeves off of here without destroying my actual mounting surfaces. I've got a face over here to worry about, and I've got a diameter here to worry about. So I'm going to get this up in the lathe because short of the bandsaw, that's the quickest way to remove a bunch of material. I've got my arbor in the lathe now, but before I just start cutting away at it, I want to run my dial on it and see how close I am to running true. That'll give me a good idea how close to the actual size I can get without worrying about touching any of the important surfaces. And it's not great. It's about 1.5 thou. I had hoped for more. I think I have my tailstock center in a machined 60-degree center in the arbor. Not sure why I'm seeing run out. I looked for damage in there. Couldn't see any, so I'm just gonna have to proceed with caution, make sure I don't go too far and actually damage the actual working surfaces of this thing. I was actually more concerned about how this end would run. Of course it matters less, but I'm not holding it on a finish ground portion. I'm holding on a prior to heat treating surface here, but you can see it's decent. It's actually running just about as good as the other end. So to rough out all this meat off of here, I think this will be fine. Now I know what I'm up against for run out. So I'm just going to be careful not to ruin the surfaces that actually matter here. And I guess I will come up with a plan on how exactly I'm going to break through with these. It might be by hand with a file. I don't know. We'll see when we get close. It might just loosen up on its own. Let's see what happens. I am going to stop well shy of the face back here that actually matters. And I'll get down closer to it later with facing operations. We didn't catch it on camera, but on the first pass where I hit this smaller, thinner ring at the front, it broke loose. So I'll just take that off now, and we'll carry on with this second, bigger, thicker ring. Pretty much at the limit of what my eyes can see. So for these last cuts, I've got 24 thou to go on the diameter. Now we know there's some run out, so I'm gonna go a little less than I think I probably can, because I really don't want to damage that working surface. I'm coming in here real careful, so just in case I got some bad math that I've done or something, you know, I'll only bugger up the first wee bit, but it certainly doesn't look like I'm touching. I should have a few thou to spare, so I'm going to go ahead with this next cut. So I'm awfully darn close on diameter. It says I have 8.5 thou to go. There's some run out in there, so this wall of this bushing is getting awful thin in some places. But for now, I'm going to record the reading on my crossfeed dial so that I know where I was when I was so close, and I'm going to work on this face for a little bit here. So I'm going to use the same basic method here. I'm going to go by eye, taking little bits off until my eye is no longer capable of seeing the distance, and then probably bring in the magnifying glass, and then finally find a way to touch off of this surface and then stay just shy of it as I cut the last little bit off. I'm just going to put this piece of paper in here and going to feel for when I get close. I'm just going to come creeping in here. Okay, so there I'm holding the paper. So as long as I stay away from that 0 that I set while I was holding the paper, I should be okay and not damage the surface. I'm also going to just rotate this a bit by hand, make sure nothing crazy is happening. That all looks good. Let's go again. It looks like that, yeah, that shoulder has broken free. And we were able to do that without touching the face underneath. So that is awesome. That's a really good start. I still have my crossfeed dials reading set. I still have a 0 on my carriage travel set. So I should be able to just wiggle this off of here. It's only a thou or so thick, thou or two maybe. Okay, we've got just next to nothing left here. It says 8 thou. I'm running out about a thou and a half. I'm just going to try a 1 thou cut, really watch that I'm not touching this surface, and see if I can weaken this enough without ever actually having cut right through it. That's my safest bet. There's a 1 thou cut, and I'm still not touching, so let's take that, see what happens. I'm hoping at some point this thing just, the sleeve just self-destructs and folds up out of there. That's another thou. Not touching it. I think we're good to go. Something's happening, it's just falling apart. I'm still not touching it. Oh, I think that's thin enough. Look, I'm picking at my fingernail. I'm going to let this setup go, and I'm going to pick the rest of that off with an X-Acto blade. There she comes. There we go. Did not touch it. Beautiful. So I do have a decent buildup of rust on here. The first thing I'm going to do is hit it with the wire wheel. This is quite hard. I don't know how hard, but it's very hard. So this mild steel wire wheel isn't going to hurt it any. I'm going to see if I can clean this up enough to make it ready for use. And if not, we'll try something different. That cleaned up pretty decent. This rust wasn't like a heavy, deep, thick rust. It seems to me as though enough rust formed between the two parts just to kind of seal them up. It didn't keep growing and growing and growing, so it was very small, light layer of rust on there. So I think this should be fine. The dial will tell. The dial does not lie. I'm just test fitting this in this cutter, and I'm pleasantly surprised. This actually goes on all the way until this face hits this face, and that's important. I was afraid this was going to stop shy like this or bottom out, on this face, which isn't ground true, in which case I'd have to make a new sleeve. But because this bottoms out on the business face, I don't need to make a new sleeve, and I can go ahead and get this in a machine and see how she runs. Quite often I'm using collets in all these fixtures, and this fixture itself has a brown and sharp taper in the bore, which is what this arbor is, brown and sharp. And so I'm going to have to remove this adapter that allows me to hold the 5C in the brown and sharp. And also this is a 24 tooth index plate, and this cutter has 5 teeth on it. And so I happen to have a homemade, janky, really abused 20 tooth plate that was never accurate, so it never got much respect or love. But having said all that, I do have the ability to index 5 teeth by only landing on the teeth that have not been completely destroyed. So I'm going to use this to get me close, and I'll explain as I go how I'm going to get the rest of the way so I get this lined up pretty much perfect. Perfect as I can. I'm going to give this arbor just the slightest little dusting with 400 grit emery cloth. I think that what that'll do is just kind of show me any high spots that are on there, and I can address those before I put this in and lock up the taper. For example, you can see there's some spots here which have gotten particularly shiny just with the slightest little touch of this really fine emery cloth. So I'm going to inspect those more closely and see if there's high spots I actually need to correct on there. Oh, she runs nice. I'm calling that 1/10,000th of an inch, a tenth of a thou. That's all I could ever dream right there. Not going to tighten this up just yet. I want to be able to dial that in as I go. Next step here is to get this damaged hole approximately oriented to where the spindle is. And what I'm actually going to do here, because there's a screw broken off in here and it's not readily obvious at what angle that screw disappears down into that surface. So what I'm going to do is, I have a bolt the same thread as these holes. I'm going to remove an adjacent insert and clamping screw. I'm going to cut the head off this bolt because I'm going to use it for dialing purposes. I'm going to thread it into that hole, and then I'm going to get it running 0 around at both ends, and then I'll know that the spindle of the machine is directly aligned with the hole. And then I'm going to use my janky index plate to index from the one I dial off to the one with the damaged screw in it. But I'm also going to have a dial set strategically so that it fine-tunes my rotation. So I know that I'll be out slightly by using this inaccurate index plate, but by having a dial set before I index, I'll know that if I just bring it to the 0, then that'll put me bang on where the original tooth that I dialed off was. I know that's a lot of information in one breath, but I hope that makes sense. I'm very roughly positioned, very roughly. Now the dialing is going to begin. But before I get going, I'm going to mark every 4th tooth on this. And that way, when it comes time to do some indexing, I know at a glance whether I'm on the right tooth or whether I'm off by a full tooth or not. I've done something similar here with my 24 tooth index, and you can see here the baby blue, that's where I would stop if I was doing 3 flutes, and then the red is where I would go to if I was doing 4 flutes. The orange is 6 flutes, and then
so on and so on and so on.
I've got that screw in there now, and it's not a perfect fit. You can see it flops around a bit, but this is still going to do the trick, and I'll explain why. See, first of all, just by eye, I can tell much better now that this needs to rotate down this way some before I even pull the dial out. And it may be because of this extra slop. Of course, it moves a lot more way out here than it does way in here. So I might have a different 0 here than I have here. But as long as I get them both running 0, then I'll know I'm as true as I can be. And what I'll do is I'll be aware of this flop, and I'll try and add that in as I consider how I'm doing at getting true. Kind of hard to explain, but as we go, I think it'll become clear. I'll have to keep moving this spring-loaded pointer for my big adjustments, but then once I get into the micro adjustments, I can use this little graduated hand wheel to give me minute movements and in a controllable way. Next step of this setup is a whole lot of dialing. I've got to get this screw running true both this way and this way. And then I've got to ensure that my spindle is true to the center line of my table, which it probably is, but we'll check that. And then I need to get the center line of this screw running true to the center line of my spindle, both vertically and horizontally. So I'm going to go ahead, do all that dialing. I'll bring you guys back in, show you the final results once that's all finished, and then we'll carry on from there. Still dialing away here. I just wanted to give you an example of one axis that I'm finally happy with. So right now I have this screw, it's slopped all the way that way, and in fact the spring pressure of the stylus of my test dial is holding it that way. And on the top of a tooth here, I'm at 0, and when I come to the far end of this and hit a high spot, I'm +5. So from here to here, I move +5. Now I'm going to take all the backlash, the slop out of this, move it in the other direction, go to a high spot. So there we're at 10. And as we travel to the other end, when we land on a high spot, we're at -5. So that tells me that I've perfectly split the two differences that are the slop in this thing, and I'm now running true in this direction. And so I just need to do that vertically, and then we can move on. So I've got a couple different things going on here. One is my stylus is able to drop between the peaks of the thread. So whenever I take a reading, I have to make sure it's at the top of a thread. So that would be the most plus direction, like you're seeing there. The other thing is there's slop in this bolt, like we discussed. But what's good here is the power of this spring is enough to always push the slop away from it. So basically what I'm looking at is 3 jaws out of a 4-jaw chuck kind of thing here, where on my high spot, I'm coming to 0 here. Then when I move to the top, on my high spot, pretty darn close to 0 there. Maybe half thou off, pretty darn close. And then over here, again, my high spots are very close to the 0. So now I do know that I've split all my differences. I should be perfectly centered to that screw. So the next thing to do, I believe I'm dialed in every which way. So I'm going to very carefully set my dial up with a 0 on it. I'm going to index, and when I get to my new index position, because this is a janky homemade index plate, it's going to be out a little, but by rotating it to the 0, I should be right back on the money, and then we'll get a center drill in there and we'll see how we did with all this dialing. Okay, so there is a spot on the flat face where the insert sits. I have a stop set on my table. You can see it's pretty reliably, repeatably going to 0. So now I'm going to come away. I'm going to make my index. I'm going to come back into my stop. That is a mile away from 0, but that's okay, because now all we have to do, we knew this index plate was out, so now all we need to do is rotate to that 0, and we will be right on the money. Right there. That should be perfectly aligned in every which way. I have this very new, very fresh, very sharp, solid carbide 60-degree spotting tool. And so I'm going to come in with that nice and easy, and I'm going to see how we did as far as where we land on that screw. I'm hoping and planning that we'll be right in the center of that screw. Let's see what happens. So we're dealing with some pretty small dimensions here all of a sudden. It's getting very challenging, even with my magnifying glass and different tools, getting quite challenging to see where the center of this spotting tool is compared to the center of the bolt. I also want to mention that when we touch off on this, no matter what, the spot we make with the spotting tool is going to look a little bit off center, because somewhere on this hole you're seeing the crest of the thread, and somewhere on this hole you're seeing the root of the thread. So this hole is going to appear to be off center by at least the single depth of the thread, I would think. But I've done all I can do with the magnification I have available to me, so I'm just going to go ahead and give this a touch, and then we'll wheel it out where we can really get a good look at it in there, and we'll see how we think we're doing. Now, I also want to mention that this is a right-hand thread, and this is a right-hand tool, which isn't ideal because in a perfect world, we'd want to use a left-hand tool and try and screw this thread out with the cutting action of the tool assisting us. We have to come out with this screw because the threads don't go all the way through. There is a hole out the back, but that's just a tap drill size hole. So this broken screw needs to come out this way. So after I spot it, it's a very jagged surface that's been left where it's broken, so it needs something to center it. So after I spot it, I'm going to come in with some left-hand drills, and they're Cobalt, which should help with the hardened screw. And I'm going to start drilling it out, and if we get really lucky, it'll just spin out of there. And if not, then we're going to move on to fabbing up a custom screw extraction tool. But we'll get into that if and when the time comes. Not a good sound. Well, it's going to be real tough for you to see this, I imagine, but my spotting tool blew up the second it touched the head of that screw. No, not the head of the screw, but the broken remnants of the screw. So I'm going to get a carbide center drill. We'll try going in with that. So we've got a decent little center spot in there, and a little bit of fingers crossed that it's centered. Again, with the thread breaking off like that, you never exactly know what you're looking at, but I think we're pretty darn close, and I'm going to run a small left-hand drill through there, see if we can create a hole. Why?
Oh, what?
Well, I guess we need a bigger center spot. That's just wandering around still. Oh, he's cutting. Hasn't even broken yet. That should be a nice fine tapered point. I think we finally have a decent center hole in there. Really struggling. That screw's too hard to cut with high-speed steel. And a lot of my stuff is well used, shall we say. But I managed to get a little bit of a hand-bombed point on this, which appears to have made a nice tapered hole here. With a little luck now, my drill will have something it can actually follow, and it won't be skipping all over the place. So let's give it a try, see what happens here. Staying on center, but it is saying no to my supposedly Cobalt drill bit. I'm having a hard time telling whether this definitely has a left-hand helix to it, and I suppose I could have dialed it, but because it was dull anyways, I went ahead and I hand-bombed a new cutting edge on there where I'm sure that I've created clearance behind the actual cutting edge. Again, couldn't really tell if it had that or not before, so just going to see what this does now. Not even touching it. Not even touching it. All right, well, I very much want a hole in there. And these left-hand drills are just not doing it. The edges just melt away the second I touch it. So that screw's much harder than this drill bit. Kind of nearing the point of desperation here. All my carbide tooling is, my worn, tired carbide tooling is failing on me. So I've slowed this machine down an awful lot. I'm gonna see maybe if this Diablo drill bit, which I had such good success with on other projects, I'm gonna see if maybe it will produce a hole for me. I think once I can get a hole in there, then I can move forwards with actually getting that thing out of there. But I need a hole, and it may even come to the point where I need to get some new tooling to finish this job off. The worst of all this was getting everything dialed. That took literally hours. Now that the setup is made, I can throw whatever I want in this drill chuck and try it. But before we give up, we're gonna try a few more things here. Well, we're gonna start with this and see what happens. I'm so not happy. I didn't work at all. You could hear it squealing right away. I didn't see anything in the any sign of chips. It's definitely dull on the leading edges. The corners are gone, they're shot. So that didn't even scratch the surface. We're definitely talking a job for full-on carbide here. I think what we're gonna have to do, folks, is I'm gonna need to get some new tooling ordered up, and we're gonna have to put this on hold for now. And unfortunately, that's gonna mean that we're ending this video without success. We're gonna come back next week though, and we're gonna see if we can finish this off and actually get this job done. I still think that it's possible. It's just giving me more grief than I expected. Not ready to give up just yet. I have one last hope here. I have this broken solid carbide 1/8 inch diameter center drill. It's broken on both ends. So what I've done is I've removed all the damage from the one end. I'm going to turn this into a left-hand carbide drill bit. Now it's not going to be a conventional drill bit in the sense of it's going to have very short, very shallow, straight flutes on it. It's going to get most of its relief through a taper so that the leading edge, the cutting edge, will be bigger in diameter than what follows behind. So that's where it's getting all of its tool clearance from. It will have a tooth face, so it'll have a rake, it'll have a clearance, so it should cut. And being as it's left hand, it may just want to walk that screw out of there. I think we owe it to ourselves and you guys to give this a try before we just up and give up. I'm going to have to reduce the diameter of this 1/8 center drill here, or this, we're going to call it carbide stock now, because it currently sits only about 5 thou under the nominal tap drill size that created that thread. And I'm not confident within 5 thou that we're bang on center to that hole. We're probably close, but I'm going to go ahead and knock probably 25 thou off this diameter. While I'm at it, I'm going to put that taper on, and then we'll work on our flutes and our cutting edges. Then we'll get it back in there and we'll see if we can make this thing drill. I've got my first setup ready to go here. I've got the spindle dialed true to the cross feed of the machine, and this wheel is raised towards the outside with clearance farther in, so I'll cut only at the outside edge, give or take. I also have that clearance we talked about earlier dialed into this motorized workhead. So when I start to touch off, you're going to notice I touch off at the back first, and I'll be into that a little ways before I clean up to the front. I want to take this thing down to about 100 thou diameter, and once we get this clearance, once we get this taper on there, and once we get the diameter down to a reasonable diameter, then I'm going to start working on the end features of this thing. Now this wheel is spinning way too fast. This is going to be hard on my diamond wheel, but I am not taking that setup apart. So I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice a tiny bit of this very affordable diamond wheel, and I'm going to get this little bit of grinding done. We'll see how much, damage it does. This isn't ideal, but that took me hours to do, so I'm not messing with that setup until either I beat this thing or it beats me. You can see some really faint sparks right here, and that is evidence that we are in fact damaging this wheel, if only slightly. There's step one done. I think it'll be pretty obvious, even on camera, that the diameter is larger here than it is down here, and that should be the feature that allows this to drill in without binding, plugging up, bunging up, and snapping off. Got my next setup here. This is where I'm going to put my tooth faces or flutes on. Again, things are getting pretty crazy. I am very fortunate in that I have two sensitive work heads, so I was able to use the second one. Now I do have clearance issues going on, so I moved my indexing plate to the back end of this thing where it was never meant to be, so my normal drawn bar wouldn't work, so I had to get a longer drawn bar, which was then too long, so I had to use some spacers. But now we're held, we're in place, we're at zero, we're ready to go. What I want to do is I'm going to plunge in. I'm well before center. I'm going to plunge in on both sides. I'm going to see what kind of web I'm creating. I'm going to keep coming in from each side until I get very minimal web. And then depth-wise, again, I'm going to go until the two flutes almost meet at center, but not quite. I need to leave some meat in there to actually do the work. So I know that's not a great explanation, but I think you're going to see as we move forwards here exactly what I'm talking about. There's our little tooth face right there. Remember, this is a left hand, so this will cut in that direction. All that's left now is to put our cutting angles on and get a little chisel edge on there and then see if she'll work. This last setup is going to give me my drill point angle and a clearance angle behind the leading edge or the lip of the drill bit. I'm not sure how this is going to show up for you, but we do have both of our cutting edges formed now. Again, left hand, so that's why it looks a little goofy. The cutting edge is over here. We do have a little chisel edge right in the middle there. Now, I'm a little concerned that the back of the last tooth is nearly as high as our cutting edge, so I'm going to put a secondary clearance angle on here and just knock these back edges down a little extra just to make good and sure I have clearance there. I'm hoping you guys can see this, but we've got some little secondary clearance angles down here, and they stop just shy of when they were going to want to start interfering with the chisel edge. So I think we're ready to give this a shot and see if she'll drill. I think we might be onto something here. This screw has actually started to back out. It is now higher than this surface, at least right here it is. So we're kind of drilling, not great, but it's the best luck we've had all day. More importantly, this thing seems to be backing out. So I'm just going to try this a little more and see if we can carry on with the success. I've got a real nice piece sticking up here. I think what might be happening is this drill is half mashing the screw. So I'm going to incredibly carefully try getting this chisel into the part that's raised above the surface that seats the insert. And I've got the tiniest little hammer here. I'm going to very, very, very gently see if I can just coax that thing to spin a little in there. I really don't want to damage that. There it goes.
It's moving. It's moving.
There it goes. Okay, okay. Whew. Yes. Really got to be careful.
Oh, there she goes.
Yeah. Got her on the run now.
Oh, exciting.
I think people watching may not understand. We've been working on this for 6 hours. We're pumped.
Just dealing with a kryptonite screw in here.
Yeah, it's just incredible whatever this thing's made out of. My meaty fingers don't really fit in there very well. Here she comes. Ooh, don't want to lose that. Beautiful. Let me get in there. Zero damage to the seat. Zero damage to the threads. We just have to clean this up, and it is as good as new. Well, I'm super excited about this. I was nearly out of options, and I thought this might have had to become a two-parter. You guys hate two-parters, near as I can tell. So, yeah, I'm glad we could bring this thing to a close all in the one video. Well, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.